Edgar Allan Poe was a famous poet known for his disturbing poems, but where did this inspiration come from? Believe it or not, Poe had a very traumatic life from the time he was born. Poe was faced with many hardships. These are shared within his stories like Tamerlane, Bernice, and the Usher House. Poe was born on January 19, 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts. According to the World History Project, a site dedicated to informing readers about the past, Poe's parents were divorced, and when his mom died at age 2, he was adopted by a rich merchant named John Allan. Poe attended school in England for a short time before returning to school at the University of Virginia. During this time, Poe developed a gambling addiction and was expelled for not paying back his dues. John Allan had received a large amount of inheritance after his uncle dies, so Poe asked Allan if he could pay back the debt. This outraged Allan. He refused to pay Poe's debt and even refused to think of him as a son because of this. Poe's story, a site that describes the timeline of Poe's life, states that after this event, Poe started his first book, Tamerlane and Other Poems. In the story, the narrator is obsessed with the past and wonders what could have happened if different choices were made. Poe writes, "In visions of the dark night I have dreamed of joy departed, but a waking dream of light and life hath left me broken-hearted." This story reflects Poe's life because he wishes for a better one with his real family, not the one with the broken one with his adoptive father. Even after all of this heartbreak, Poe was able to find love with Alima Royster and get engaged. However, they were not able to get married because Royster's parents didn't want their daughter engaged to Poe, leaving Poe with yet another heartbreak. With Poe broke and hopeless, he decides to join the army so that he can make some money. He was in the army for about 5 years and was raised to regional sergeant. However, he was forced to return home when his Mrs. Allan dies. This allows Poe and John Allan to make amends, and Allan even helps Poe get into West Point. However, Allan doesn't pay the dues, and Poe gets kicked out for insufficient funds. He marries his cousin Virginia Clemm shortly after this. He begins to write short stories and sends them to be published, only for them to be rejected. Poe reaches out to Allan, the only person on his side, but is left with nothing in return. A year later, John Allan dies and leaves nothing in his will for Poe. This inspires Poe to write Bernice. You can see the pain in the story due to recent events. He writes, "Misery is manifold, the wretchedness of earth is multiform, overreaching the wide horizon as the rainbow. Its hues are as various as the hues of that arch, and as distinct too, yet as intimately blended, overreaching the wide horizon as the rainbows. How is it that from beauty I have derived a type of unloveliness?" Poe explains that he is bound to misery and that it is all around him. It blocks him from seeing the goodness of the world. Things start to look up for Poe once he wins a contest for his writing and is able to get a job. Over the next few years, Poe's writing takes off and is able to publish a book. He later writes The Usher House. In the story, the narrator resembles Poe because the narrator is forced to face his fears and accept reality. Poe has felt as if he didn't know himself because he spent most of his life dealing with one problem after the other. He writes, "I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that while beyond doubt there is a combination of very simple, natural objects which have the power of affecting us, still, the power lies among us, considerations beyond our depth." Poe was in pain from all the trauma he had faced that has affected his mentality. He is confused on how to help himself because he doesn't understand who he truly is past the trauma. A few years after The Usher House is published, Virginia dies of tuberculosis. Because of this, Poe develops a heavy drinking problem. After dealing with his addiction for a couple years, Poe is rushed to the hospital after being found dazed and in desperate need of help. He soon dies in the hospital from what is believed to be brain problems and alcohol poisoning. Even though Poe lived to be 40, his stories would live on forever. People around the globe have read his stories, getting goosebumps from the unsettling events that are described. It's hard to read his stories the same, knowing that they are heavily inspired by his own life. Poe was suffering and could only cope with what he knew to do best, write.